Hello, everyone, and welcome to the On-Campus College Planning. I am Tom Cleese, your host. This is the podcast where we talk about everything college admissions, from standardized testing to finding the right colleges to paying for colleges, all of those things that you want to know about. This is real college planning for real families like yours, because it's the University of You, not the University of Them. Welcome to episode 6. This is going to be my shortest podcast ever, I promise. This is going to be just a real brief introduction to the Fafsa. I'm calling it Fafsa in 5. There are a lot of great resources out there, and I'm going to point out a couple of those for you. What I'm hoping to do is just, number one, kind of dial this down in terms of maybe some of your fears or apprehensions about the Fafsa, give you a little bit of information, maybe a little push, a little nudge to get started on this, and just help kind of set the record straight on a few things. There are a lot of myths, misconceptions, a lot of crying and gnashing of teeth about the financial aid process, and there really doesn't need to be. So I hope you'll just kind of relax a little bit, listen to me for a few minutes, and then certainly follow up with me for questions. This is really for parents and students who haven't filed this before. So you're a senior in high school and you think you need to do this or something, or you're a parent of a senior in high school, or a junior, or you just want to know because you got some kids coming up. Maybe you've even filed it. Maybe you're like me. You filed it a couple of times, but you need a refresher on a few things. Or a little nudge to move forward as well. So that's what it's about. I'm not going to be talking about a lot of special circumstances. I watched a couple of different webcasts and listened to some podcasts where people go into great detail. Some of them were, hour and a half long. That is not it. I'm not a Fafsa expert. I'm a dad that fills it out for his kids. And I'm a college planner that knows enough about the Fafsa to tell you that you can do this yourself. We don't sell any kind of Fafsa services. I don't fill it out for anyone. There are some people that help with that, and in some cases that might be warranted. But for the vast majority of people, this is definitely a do-it-yourself type of thing. So I want to give you some information about that. So here's what the Fafsa is. It is the free application for federal student aid. Let me say that again, the free application for federal student aid. So a couple important points there. It's free, right? Don't go to a website where you have to pay to fill it out, okay? And also make sure that you're going to the correct website. It used to be at fafsa.gov. Now it's at studentaid.gov. If you type in fafsa.gov, it's going to redirect you to studentaid.gov, so that's fine. But there used to be some like fafsa.com, some bogus websites and things like that. It is an application for federal student aid, but the way to really think about this is like the first step in the financial aid process. You don't get money from the Fafsa. I've seen people post on various discussion boards, hey, I filled out the Fafsa, like, when do I get my loan? And that's not at all how it works. It's the first step. I think of it as like entering sort of a gateway, right? I'm on a journey. There are going to be a number of steps. And this, for most students, most families at most colleges, this is going to be the absolute first step in terms of the financial aid process, okay? So you don't get money from the Fafsa, but it helps determine what you're eligible for. If you're eligible for federal student loans, whether subsidized or unsubsidized, a Parent Plus loan. You can't get a Parent Plus loan if you don't file the Fafsa. And also federal grants such as a Pell Grant, and also federal work study. Work study at every college is a federal program. And so you're like, well, such and such college, hey, just give my kid a job as part of his financial aid process. It'll make it easier. He doesn't have to go off campus, et cetera. That's a federal program, and those dollars are tied to the Fafsa. So you really do need to fill this out. And I always get a lot of pushback, kind of from the, especially the dad who's like, I do well. We make too much. We're not going to get any need. You should fill it out. Number one, it's not difficult. It takes about a half hour. There's going to be a couple of things that you need to track down. I'm kind of in the middle of filling it out, and I still have to get a little bit of information, but it is not difficult at all. And there's absolutely no downside. I mean, unless you think that you don't have a half hour to spend. And the reason why I absolutely recommend that you fill it out, even if you're 100% sure, you're Bill Gates, you're not getting any need-based aid. Some colleges tie merit scholarships, which have nothing to do with need. They tie that to filling out the Fafsa. I hate to tell this story, but I have to. We didn't fill it out my freshman year. We being my parents, when little Tommy Cleese was was a senior in high school. Dad had a real good job, and he just figured we don't need to do it. And tuition was a lot cheaper. I was going to a state public university. We didn't fill it out, and later when I got to campus, I learned that had we filled it out that first time, we did every year after that, but had I filled it out that first time, we wouldn't have gotten any need-based aid, but I would have qualified based on my class rank and my grades for a presidential scholarship at my university. It would have paid something like a third of my tuition the rest of my time. And I begged and pleaded, like, can I fill it out now once I got to campus? Can I do it for next year? No, you have to do it in the beginning. So please, please fill it out. It's not difficult. You're going to fill it out online. You can fill it out on your phone, but don't. Okay, just don't. You open up a browser, use a laptop or I guess a tablet, but why don't you use a laptop or a desktop? Fill that out. You'll just be able to see it better. You're going to need to enter some information, and your student is going to need to enter some information. And if you got multiple students, you're going to be entering a lot of information there. It's going to start with creating what's called an FSA ID, a Fafsa ID, basically, which is just kind of like a username, password, that type of thing. And you're going to need that. I've got a folder, and I keep track of all this stuff because inevitably I go and I can't remember the password, and we have to reset it and things like that. So just do some good documentation. Start a folder this year. I'm also going to be talking just really briefly about something called the CSS Profile. Just want to remind myself of that, but that's a different form. And so let me just touch on that at the very end. So the FAFSA goes live every year on October 1st. Doesn't mean you have to line up October 1st and fill it out. It is October 29th today. I'll get mine turned in sometime next week, and that'll be plenty good. Don't wait too long, but it's not like you have to be the first one in line to do this. What they're really looking for, they're looking for four things. They're looking for parental income and parental assets, and then student income and student assets. Those are the four primary categories. Now, the things that they're not looking for, okay, the FAFSA is not looking for things that are like the value of your home. That's not included in this. They are not looking at any retirement investments you have. So if you have a 401k, if you're like me and you're self-employed and you have a SEP, or if you work for government, you've got a 503b, any of those types of things, those are going to be protected. If you just have some money in stocks and you're kind of playing the market, that's not going to be protected. And by protected, I mean you're going to have to report that. And you'll have to report your 529s as well. Those are in your student's name, but you actually are the owner. But don't sell those, don't transfer those away. That's not going to automatically discount you from getting financial aid. So the information that you really need to have with you need to know your social security number, and your student needs this as well, your driver's license number. You're going to need your tax forms, okay? And so if it's, so this is 2021, and I'm filling it out for, both my boys to go to school for next year. So that's fall 2022 to 2023 academic year. So I'm filling it out in the fall of 2021 for next year's financial aid, right? So for the 2022, but I'm using the 2020 taxes, and they refer to that as prior year. So it's sort of 2 years back from when you would receive the aid or need the aid in that case. And you need to file it every year. So you fill it out when your student is a senior, and then you won't fill it out when your student is a college senior, assuming he, she, or they doesn't go on to grad school or extend their education, but you will fill it out. It's easier the second time, the third time, etc., like that. So the documentation is really no big deal. And one of the things that's extremely easy to use, if it works, it doesn't always work, it's called the data retrieval tool, DRT. They came up with this maybe 5-6 years ago, and what it does is you're filling out the FAFSA, and it's going to need to know, like, what's your adjusted gross income, those types of things. And it says, hey, do you want to link up with IRS right now and kind of pull in that stuff, because we'll just populate that for you, and you have to agree to that. And it tells you, hey, we're leaving the FAFSA site and we're going to go over to the IRS, and so you have to log into that. And you have to enter some information, but then it does pull that from your taxes. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. This year it didn't work for me. I'm not sure exactly why, but it was no big deal because I literally walked 3 feet to the filing cabinet and I pulled out my taxes, and it asked for specific numbers on specific lines, and it really didn't take very long at all. So that's what they're looking for. It's fairly basic tax and financial information. You might need some bank statements or access to your online banking, because there's some questions that are going to be very specific to the time you fill it out. What is your cash on hand and savings, as of today? So I don't want to get into games or whatever, but if you're thinking about maybe making some kind of a purchase, you may want to do that the day before you fill out the FAFSA. I've had a lot of people say that our student's going to buy a laptop, and she or they is going to buy it right before we fill out the FAFSA. That's fine, but just be aware that those are things that it's going to ask, because that's within the assets portion. Remember 4 things: parental income, parental assets, student income, student assets. If your student didn't fill out a tax return last year, that's not a problem. It asks you if they plan to or if they have, and in most cases, most students aren't doing that, so that's not a problem. But they're going to have to do a little bit of record keeping as well. Okay, so prior year, it's sort of 2 years back. And then what happens is within a couple of days, usually within a week, you are going to get another email. First, you'll get an email saying, hey, we got it. Thanks very much. Give us a little while. And then you're going to get what's called a student aid report, or SAR. So a student aid report is really just kind of going to hold it up and say, is this what you said? And it's really good to look through that. If you need to make some changes, you can, but it's just going to kind of repeat back to you what you had. And within that student aid report, there's going to be a very important and really scary number. Okay, so let's talk about that. It's called your expected family contribution, your EFC number, expected family contribution. Here's what it's not. It's not a number that you automatically have to like open up your wallet and pay that. It's not necessarily what you will pay for college. It's the federal government, in all its wisdom, pause for irony, saying that we think, according to our algorithms, our calculations, your family, parents, student, should be able to put forth this amount. Let's say your expected family contribution is $20,000, and you're like, wow, we don't have $20,000 saved. I don't have that in a bank account or whatever. Just don't panic, because what that number does is you tell the FAFSA where to send this to. So if you're applying to even up to 10 schools, and there's a way to get beyond that too, but you're applying to 5 schools, and so you're a senior or a parent of a senior, you're going to look up those 5 schools and kind of enter those codes, and then your student aid report with your EFC is going to go out to those 5 schools, and then they will use that as part of their financial aid process to determine what's called need. Now, we'll get into that at a later date. And actually, if you go back to a newsletter that we sent out about a week and a half ago, I've actually got some great video training, and I'm happy to share this with you, that goes into much more depth on estimating costs of college and how to understand the EFC a lot better. So if you're not on our newsletter, pop me a note, let me know. We'll get you signed up for that, and we'll send you out some great content a couple of times a month, along with this podcast as well. So your EFC number is part of the financial aid process. College X is going to deduct that from their cost of attendance to come up with need, and then they're going to determine how they're going to put together a financial aid package. So that's a bigger discussion. I went into that, and I'll go into that more in future podcasts as well. So I get my SAR back. I check to make sure everything's good, and then I just kind of wait for that. Now, a couple of things that pop up. Number one, I mentioned the CSS Profile. So what is that? Well, it's an alternative form that some colleges use, and I'm going to rattle off some colleges in the Midwest where a lot of you folks are, and these colleges, as of the website I looked up on College Board, because the SAT folks, the AP folks, they're the ones that handle this CSS Profile. Sounds like a crime show. So Beloit College, Lawrence University, Northland College in Wisconsin. In Illinois, it would be Illinois Wesleyan, Northwestern University, University of Chicago, Lake Forest, a couple other smaller ones that I don't get a lot of students talking about. In Iowa, hey, Hawkeyes. Hawkeyes don't have to fill it out, but Grinnell, Loras, Northwestern of Iowa over in Orange City, and Wartburg. And then in Minnesota, Carleton, Gustavus, McAllister, and St. Olaf. Let me run through those again. If you are applying to these, you're going to need to fill out the CSS profile also. Beloit, Lawrence, Northland, Illinois Wesleyan, Lake Forest, Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, Northwestern in Orange City, Iowa, University of Chicago, Grinnell College, Loras College in Dubuque, Wartburg, Carleton, Gustavus, McAllister, and St. Olaf. Oh, and then to our folks down in Missouri, St. Louis University, William Jewell uses it, and Washington University, WashU in St. Louis uses that as well. That's a topic for a different day, and I'll consider doing a podcast for that. It's a little bit less relevant, but still important. We'll try to push out some resources on that as well. So just be aware of that. Now, the biggest question that comes up for me that I can help with in terms of the FAFSA is often from divorced parents, and they want to know, do we both fill it out? Does just one of us? Who fills it out, et cetera? In fact, I just responded to a couple of great folks, some clients today about this very thing. All right. So if you and your spouse or you and your partner are divorced, legally divorced, the custody arrangement really doesn't play into this, because a lot of people say, well, we have joint custody, so I don't know how to do this. Okay. Generally, there's just going to be one parent that fills it out, and it's going to be what the FAFSA refers to as a custodial parent. And again, that's different from a legal definition. The FAFSA defines it as the parent with whom the student spent more nights in the previous year. Okay. So I assume that you don't have a checkbox of like how many nights that Johnny slept at your house versus her house, but you need to figure out where did they spend more time. And if it really is 50-50, then you're going to need to make a determination based on good faith of who is going to enter that information. So if I am divorced and my son spent more nights with me, I'm filling out the FAFSA. My ex is not putting in any information. And if I am remarried, that person's information will go on the FAFSA as well. So that's something to be aware of. If you are remarried and you are filing the FAFSA on behalf of your student, you need to include that information as well. The CSS profile is going to ask for both parents and spouses if you're remarried. But that's something different. So that's a determination that you have to make. And is it better for the parent who has less income and less assets to fill it out because they'll have a greater chance of being eligible for some need-based aid? Yeah, that's obviously correct. That's just how math works. I'm not going to make any kind of recommendations on how you should determine this, but you and your ex need to have a conversation about this to make sure that you're on board with this. And the conversation, or the question that came to me this morning was, a person saying, and they're a family that I work with both parents, and they're fantastic. They're both really engaged in this. It's great. But they said, hey, we determined that I should fill it out, but I didn't actually include the students on my tax return. My partner did last year. Is that still legal? And yes, it is. And so I just want you to understand there are differences between IRS tax filing and legal custody in a court of law and what the FAFSA does. So you really need to pay attention to those as well. Okay. Fill out the FAFSA. Just do it. If you're dragging your feet, just set aside an hour. You know what? The Packers don't play this Sunday, woohoo, because they won last night. So that would be a great time. There's no good games on. So fill out the FAFSA, sit down for a half hour, or at least get it started. That's usually the biggest hurdle for me. Is it's just one of those things that I kind of avoid. And when I finally look through my fingers, and stare at the monster, I'm like, that wasn't so bad. And I always feel really good and very adult-like as a 56-year-old, very adult-like when I do start to fill it out. And yeah, I've been getting a couple of emails saying, hey, you're not quite done, Tom. You're not that much of an adult. I'll get to you guys. Okay. I promise I'll get to you next week. I'll talk to my kids. We'll make sure we dot all the I's and cross all the T's. That is the FAFSA in 5 or 19 minutes. So I guess I had more to say, but I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got questions about the financial aid process, please contact me, Tom at OnCampusCollegePlanning.com. And you know what? The best thing, I love getting a call in the middle of the day. I'm not always able to take your call if I'm with a student, but I try to get back as soon as possible. And parents are always very like, well, I don't know if you have time to talk about this. I'll set aside a half hour. We'll talk about college. We'll talk about money in college, all of those things. Next week, the podcast is going to be about how to have that college money talk with your family. And this isn't parenting advice. This is college planning advice coming from a parent who's been down that path. So I hope you'll tune in for that. That's episode 7. We're wrapping up episode 6, the FAFSA in 5. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you've got comments, get in touch with me. Set up a free consult. Like us on whatever platform you're using, and we will see you again real soon. This is Tom. Go College.